Hello and good day to everyone. So in this video, I'm going to demonstrate this nasal cavity model. So first, let's start with the boundaries of the nasal cavity. So this is the nasal septum. Okay, nasal septum is the medial wall of the nasal cavity. So this nasal septum is comprised of septal cartilage anteriorly. Superiorly, this is the perpendicular plate of ethmoid, and inferiorly, this is vomer. Okay, and if you look at here, this is the nasal crest of maxilla, and this is the nasal crest of palatine bone. Okay, what about the floor of the nasal cavity? This is the floor of nasal cavity. This is the palatine process of maxilla, and this is the horizontal plate of palatine bone. Okay, next is the roof of the nasal cavity. So this is the cribriform plate of ethmoid bone. This is the nasal spine of frontal bone, and this is the body of sphenoid. Okay, this is the posterior nasal aperture, which is known as choana or choane, okay, which communicates the nasal cavity with the nasopharynx. So this is the nasopharynx area. This is the choana. Okay, now let's remove this nasal septum. So now we can see the lateral wall of the nasal cavity. So first, this is the nasal bone. This is the superior nasal concha. This is middle nasal concha. And this is inferior nasal concha or turbinate. So each nasal concha or turbinates enclose the nasal meatus. So this is the superior nasal meatus. Beneath this nasal concha, middle nasal concha, is the middle nasal meatus, and this is inferior nasal meatus. So if I remove this structure, what we can see here, this is the olfactory tract, this is olfactory bulb, and this is the olfactory nerves. So this area is the olfactory area, and the remaining area is the respiratory area. Okay, back to this area. This is the superior nasal meatus, where you can find the opening of the posterior ethmoidal sinus. Okay, this area is the middle nasal meatus, where you can find this structure here. This is the bulla ethmoidalis. Okay, and this is the opening for the middle ethmoidal sinus. This is the hiatus semilunaris. Okay, and this is where the litus area is located. Okay, and this is the nasopharynx. Okay, this is the pharyngeal opening of the auditory tube. This is the salpingo-palatine fold. This is the tubal elevation or the torus tubarius. This is salpingo-pharyngeal fold. And this area is the pharyngeal recess or fossa of Husserl-Muller. And this is the collection of the lymphoid tissue or the pharyngeal tonsil. Okay, while this area, this is the sphenoethmoidal recess, where you can find there is an opening here that goes to the sphenoidal sinus. This is the sphenoidal sinus. This is the frontal sinus. Okay, move on to this model. This is also the lateral wall of the nasal cavity, but without the mucosal layer. So this is the superior nasal concha, this is the middle nasal concha, and this is the inferior nasal concha. This is the sphenoidal sinus, and this is the frontal sinus. Okay, right, so if I remove this middle nasal concha, what we can see is this is the superior nasal meatus. Okay, this is superior nasal meatus. This is the opening to the posterior ethmoidal sinus. Okay, this is the middle nasal meatus, where you can find this is the bulla ethmoidalis. This is the opening to the middle ethmoidal sinus. Okay, this is the hiatus semilunaris. Okay, this hiatus semilunaris opens laterally to the ethmoidal infundibulum. Okay, so through this ethmoidal infundibulum, there is an opening that goes to the frontal sinus. Okay, via the frontonasal duct. Okay, so in the ethmoidal infundibulum, you can also see the opening to the anterior ethmoidal sinus, and this is the opening to the maxillary sinus. While in the inferior nasal concha, there is an opening here that goes to the nasolacrimal duct. Other structure that can be seen in this model, this is the sphenopalatine foramen. Okay, and this is the sphenoethmoidal recess, where you can find the opening to the sphenoidal sinus. This is the opening to the sphenoidal sinus. Okay, and other structures, this is the frontal process of the maxilla. This is the uncinate process, and this is the lateral septal cartilage. This is major alar cartilage, nasal bone. Okay, and then the superior nasal concha and middle nasal concha is actually part of the ethmoid bone, but for the inferior nasal concha, it is actually part of the viscerocranium. It is part of the facial bone, but the superior and middle nasal conchae is part of the ethmoid bone, which is part of the neurocranium.